I can remember when you and Daddy would go and do the presentation at night, because you'd usually Joni in charge of us, and it was really miserable.
She'll appreciate
Have your big
that.
sister in charge of you. But I do seriously remember that. I do remember that it was a big deal for you all the first time you did it, because it was for somebody who was getting their American citizenship, and I remember y'all talking about that. My understanding was he got called to give a speech.
He did, and he
didn't have time to do it.
And
you said, "Well, I'll write something and I'll come along and just draw
A
something
couple
to
of
go with
pictures.
it." Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's literally how it started.
Yeah.
And then you got 5 invitations from that time, and so you went and did it again, and then you were doing it,
They just kept
once
coming.
or twice
I
a
think you
week.
probably will remember the very first time that we did it, after it all got together, and was what ended up with us doing it till the very end,
Yeah.
was when we did it in Chicago to the Sertoma Club in front of more than 200 people.
Well, it was like 2,000 people.
Well,
It was a
Whatever.
national convention, so it was big.
Yeah.
But that was the first time.
that
you did
was
it?
the very first time we did it as a group
Mhm.
all together, when all of you were there, and that started it.
Mhm.
From that, we got invitation after, we must have 200 invitations in a scrapbook
And
somewhere.
I
we
remember
kept.
that Daddy used to introduce the program with, "This is the 33rd time we've done," and he would tell how many times, up to 100 and something, and I don't remember how many we wound up eventually doing, but I do remember it seemed like we were somewhere at least a couple of times a week on average, that we would do
There
it
were
for
times when we
civic
were
club
like that.
luncheon and a church group, on a Wednesday night, and I mean, it just seemed like we went a whole lot. Well, I tell you, I don't know how you all did it with kids that fight, because they have to sit on top
Wasn't
of each
easy.
other.
We went through so many big places. We went to Denver,
Mhm.
Chicago,
We did it in Florida. We did it in
Louisiana.
St. Petersburg, I remember. Monroe, Louisiana, I remember making that trip. All over. I mean, there's not any place in Middle Tennessee that we didn't go. We went to schools and civic clubs and churches, Boy Scout honor banquets. I mean, I just remember it was just one thing. And you would do it one place and you would get 3 invitations from that. I never felt like this was a gratuitous flag-waving program because my dad was a politician. I mean, I felt like it was a sincere and honest telling of the story of the history of the flag, which then sort of grounds us in learning about the sacrifices that have been made to achieve what America has achieved. I remember how moving it was when, as our history changed, I remember you had to add in when, was it Apollo 11? Which was the one that burned? Yeah, and I remember we changed the program. We changed the script in that. We did it after the Challenger exploded because you edited the script for that. Again, we weren't doing it regularly, but when we did it the next time after that. But to hear the history of the country, it was, I think things were different in terms of, how patriotism was viewed. But if you think about it, I mean, this is literally in that whole tail end of the Vietnam War. There was a whole lot of dissension about the government and who was right and who was wrong, and there were a lot of protests. This came on the heels of the assassinations of Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy, and so it was a pretty the country in general was not at a place of just kind of perfect peace. And I think because this the program didn't try to point out any rights or wrongs. It just kind of told the story. And I think maybe that's why it worked. It was naturally choreographed. We didn't, we never talked about, well, this will be very effective if you will do this at this point in time.
It just happened.
But I remember Daddy coming after he would finish, and we would be singing "This Is My Country," and you would be finishing frantically the Uncle Sam picture that was so moving. Uncle Sam on his knees praying, which is a really powerful image. And Daddy would just move over and stand behind us, and we would all finish "This Is My Country" and hope that you didn't finish in time to be able to sing at the end with us.
Mother, move your lips, don't make any noise.
We did a lot of VFW halls all over the state, and that would absolutely be one of the places where it was best received. And you know that those men in that day, it was before women were in the military, and those men were, they would be deeply moved hearing that story, knowing that they had, many of them paid the price, and some of their friends and family paid the ultimate price for that story. So that was always a special place for us to do it. I think one of the things that made it notable was it was an age in our history when there was enough conflict separating families over issues. I mean, you think about, young adults who were avoiding the draft or didn't want to serve, and the greatest generation parents, dads who had served in a world war and couldn't understand, what was going on. And so there was some sense of, there were a lot of places where families didn't get along. And I think maybe there was something to seeing a family doing something like this together that was sort of a light in a shadowy place. I don't call it dark place, but where this is kind of different, because here is a family, proud of their country and telling the story and doing this together, and they seem to get along and like each other, and there was enough conflict in in what was going on with the current event of that day to make that kind of a unique
Part
thing.
of my involvement, I think, not a lot, but it's hard to tell how much when you look back. I had a brother wounded in the Second World War, and I'm sure that had something to do with the way I felt and some of the comments I made in the speech that John gave. And his involvement with having the polio, and as he got older, that meant something to him, that he needed to give back what people at like Warm Springs had given him.
And I think collectively we were always, at the end, we were honored that we had the opportunity to do what we did.
And I will have to say that they gave up a lot at school. They were all very involved with activities at school, and all 4 of the children gave up things that they were involved in and went with us. And we didn't make them go, but we gave them the opportunity, and they took it.
I think the power of the program, the reason that it got standing ovations everywhere that we went, from VFWs that you would expect that they would be all into to a high school, and that the reason was that it showed the common thread that should unite us as Americans, and not pointing out the bad things that all of us are guilty of. Ignoring people, or whatever negatives there are. The script and the music and the pictures all painted a picture of these are the things that unite us, instead of this is all the reasons that we are divided. And I think that was the power of it.
And see, I can't take credit for doing some of this.
No, I think it just happened.
But
I think it just happened, and you
But
telling
I
the
can't
story.
help but think that all of you were touched in some way with this, whether you enjoyed doing it or not. You were touched by it, and it has had an influence on your life and how you respond to different things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you hear that story 200-something times, I mean, if you think about it, we heard the history of the American flag.
You should know it.
200 times. It's ingrained in you when you do that, and it's why I'm confident that I'm as patriotic as any American there is. And so if I disagree with somebody, it doesn't come from a place of not having thought about this story or being exposed to it.
Yeah.
So, and I think maybe that is the power of it.